Your group in Denmark
Yeah.
is at the origin of a very interesting initiative. It's called Constructive journalism. Tell me if I'm wrong, but it's based on the fact that you believe that news are not always negative, and that negative news are not a correct reflection of the reality, right?
Yeah, the problem as we see it is that we tend to use only one eye. We want our colleagues and ourselves to use both eyes. We tend to focus on negative news. We've done so since, well, I brought a very old quote. Back in 1883, the great Reuter told his newsagents and correspondents the following: please cover the following: fires, explosions, floods, railway accidents, destructive storms, earthquakes, shipwrecks, street riots, and murders of a sensational character. Do we do this today? Yes, we do. They are all over the place. They are all over the news, in the papers, in the radio, and then on the TV. And what we feel is that this create amongst our viewers and listeners and readers a sort of an apathy. People leave the news, they can't bear to see this. Also because this is not, of course, and luckily not the whole truth. But we know, because the psychologists hundreds of years ago, they knew that fear makes us hear. And fear makes also us sell newspapers. So we just want to try to create constructive journalism as a third leg in doing news or journalism. We do news, of course, breaking news that's about today and what's happening today. We do investigative journalism about what did take place yesterday. And these are, of course, two very, very important journalistic kinds of work. But we need to do constructive journalism as the third leg in this to try to finish the circle of news. So we are trying to start up constructive news where the investigative reporters left.
Does it work?
It does, because we learn from people that they want this. This is not naive, positive news done by a North Korean government, and nor is it sweet cat videos on the internet. This is something that people long for, and I can surely understand that, because that's also the thing when I look and watch news. I want more constructive news in order to fulfill the picture of the world that we are living in.
And DR is working like this?
Yeah, we are. We are not labeling it constructive news or solutions journalism. We try to bring it in our newscast. I'm working at the main newscast at 9 o'clock, and we try to bring it in all parts of the newscast. But we don't label it because then it would become some sort of a space within. And
how about the journalists? Are they on board on this? Do they agree with this kind of?
More and more are. Last year we did. My institute was started last summer, and then we did a global conference in Aarhus at the University of Aarhus in October, and a lot of investigative reporters were also invited, and there were probably a lot of them sitting like this, because they don't want it, because they feel that it's naive stuff, and they maybe believe that we are going to take something away from them. But this is not the case.
Is it called solution journalism as well?
Sometimes. In America, the phrase would normally be solutions journalism. And honestly, personally, I don't care if it's solutions journalism or constructive journalism, as long as it's talking about the tomorrow.
Joël, is it possible to have this kind of news in Switzerland?
Sure, it's possible, yeah. But it's a cultural change, right?
Yeah.
It's about culture. Culture is probably the hardest thing to change. But what I know for Switzerland, and it's for England too, is that the people want to be updated about the news. They want the breaking news, they want it. Mm. But they want it less, that they want be more durability in the information. Often when I speak about news, I just think by myself, but how much time this news is valid? and a lot of news are not valid for a long time. Maybe it's just few minutes, but it's important too. And I don't think it's good to leave one to go to the other side.
Julie, do you teach constructive journalism?
No.
Not yet, maybe.
No, because we were speaking about this just earlier, just before the conference. No, because I think there's many ways to do journalism. It's one way. I mean, but actually, when the students work on a subject, some of them will focus on solutions. Some others will focus on problems. Some of them will want to do interviews. What we teach them is how to do this in any time.
Okay.
But I won't say, for me, journalism has to be, as we said, useful, but it has to reach an audience, okay? So if people need and want solutions, okay, so let's do this for them. But I think other people will need questions, other people will need dramas and narratives. The most important for me is to tell truth and true stories. True stories, if it's very hot news, it's going to be hot news, but it just have to be true.
Thank you. Small word from Christophe about this.
Yes, I would say that the question is to tell the truth, but also to deal with the whole reality, and as big as possible. And sometimes you can have a bias that you are not conscious about it, and this bias can be a global negative bias. And I think that's the example you quoted on the fact that we can say, oh yes, we recognize sometimes our world. There is a huge bias that that is sometimes created for cultural reasons, for industry reasons, because you can consider you sell more easily dramas than more other types of news. But we have to find the ways to help journalists to go beyond this bias and to be able to deal with events. And events are very often catastrophes, or they are not, very often the events are not positive. You can have parties, ceremonies, etc., but mostly that's negative. And deal with situations, evolutions, another way to deal with the reality. And I have to mention that what you spoke about has been integrated in the declaration that we have published, because I also asked the founder of the center, Ulrich Agerup, who is a former head of the News and Information Department in the Danish public TV, to be a member of our commission, and it was something, of course, that we not only had in mind, that we want to also take.
Allan, you wanted to add a word?
Yeah, just it is a cultural thing that we have to change, and it's a Yes, sure. It is a cultural thing that we have to change, and it's a cultural thing within our profession, because people are ready for it out there. They long for it. So it's us. We are going to change here. And the latest great example of this is this thing that I know that you also focus on in France, the whole tax evasion thing. We did a great story. Colleagues of mine investigated reporters back in Denmark in collaboration with colleagues abroad. And now they are exposed, some of the people who challenged our tax system. And what then? Now all the news stories about this topic stopped, actually. And then people are sitting there in their couches around the country saying, okay, what are we going to do now? And that's why constructive journalism, solutions journalism should play a part.
Joël Aouar. Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with the fact that we have to tell right news that are true. But I remember a few years ago, and it's a problem for me too sometimes. A few years ago in Switzerland, we have unemployment really low. And a few years ago, 0.2% of employment were a progression. and all media, not mine too, but all medias in Switzerland were literally in panic. 0.2 and all the press told about that, but the press doesn't speak about all the jobs creating weeks after week, months after month. That's not for me good news journalism. I don't like this approach. It's just facts. When we told that yesterday in Syria were 72 dead persons, okay, telling that, what do we really say when we say that? I just interrogate myself about that.
Yeah. Hi, about Brexit and constructive journalism, just my question is whether you think the media did enough constructive journalism, let's say, explaining what could happen in the future, because now, for example, after nearly 2 years, we see that the opinion is shifting. Thank you.
Well, yeah, okay, that's working. Well, as in many other cases, I don't think so that they did enough. They started, of course, very early in going in this battle between the two political sides, and this was what it was all about. Was it out or was it stay? Like in Denmark, when we have our elections, it's all about red or blue bloc. So we try to often to simplify the news so much that we don't go into a discussion about what is going on if we say yes, what is going on if we say no. And so from my point of view, even though that I'm not an expert on Brexit, I saw a very typical news coverage where it was very for or against and not that constructive.